make sure it was clean, and then we can put it back in. So even in the army, we're not good like the Rebbe Rashab.
This predicament Rabbi,
Yes, where I was.
This was Dafka on the night of the 14th, or no?
No, this was several days prior to Pesach. Yeah, it can be done any night, as we said. There was no limitation.
No, you didn't. You mentioned last time you went over this. Maybe you're going to, but the whole thing about if you did many areas of your house at night beforehand, the night of the 14th, there's still you have to leave something to do.
Correct. So we have to make sure to leave at least one area uncleaned in order so we can do b'dikas chametz there with a blessing. If we did everything beforehand, then in truth, we've already done b'dikas chametz, not just cleaning for chametz to the entire home. There's nothing less to do b'dika to.
And you have to leave something that you didn't do at night. It could be completely clean yet, but you can't. You have to have not
Correct.
done it at night.
Exactly.
Right.
Correct. Yes. And you're also doing the 10 pieces, so you're covered. You have your insurance policies from all.
Great plan.
Okay, let's now go through a few other Rebbe Rashab halachas that relate to Pesach. In memory of the Rebbe Rashab, his yahrzeit is today, things we can learn from him.
Wait, one final question on that, about the 10 pieces. Let's say you do like 90% of your home properly with a night check before, then you come to the last night, do you have your kids put the 10 pieces brown in one room, just sort of as a symbolic thing?
If you did do the whole,
if you did everything before,
correct.
About 90
you would
pieces,
then
put
still say a bracha. Have another person spread out the 10 pieces, so now you've basically recontaminated your home with chametz. That's what you've done.
But spread out in that one room.
Correct.
Elsewhere, right?
Correct.
Nowhere else.
You don't have to put it everywhere in the house.
Why? If it's already clean for chametz, why? Those rooms that you already did a bedika to, why contaminate it? Why put chametz in them?
But there's no reason not to do it.
You can do what you want, but there's no need to do so. Okay, we have a lot more stuff here from the Rebbe Rashab. Let's get started. May one eat matzah within the same course as other foods, and may one be stringent not to do so? Okay, so this sounds like a strange question to some people, but for old school Lubavitchers, this is a very serious question. Okay, most people won't even understand what this question is. What are you talking about? Can I eat matzah in the same course as other foods? I mean, you want me to starve? Like, you want me not to eat on Pesach? What does that even mean, this question? Of course you can eat matzah while you're eating other foods, right? Of course you can eat matzah there while you're eating other foods. I mean, matzah is chametz. So this, of course, begins the question of gebrach, of matzah shruya, of matzah that contacts water. So we know that the concept of avoiding eating matzah shruya is an old custom that started at least 200 years ago, possibly due to the invention or innovation of the very thin cracker-like matzahs, which were made very hastily, and therefore it would have a chance of having flour left that was not needed with water. And so whenever flour is not needed with water, if it ever does contact water, that flour can now start its 18-minute process to become chametz. So back in the day when they made the fluffy matzahs like the Yemenites do today, where it's soft and bendable, when it was nicely kneaded and they took time, there was no suspicion that any specks of flour were in. But today, already for the past 250 years, that the process is very, very quick and speedily, and to make very thin and hard matzahs, there's chance that there may be flour that was not needed with the water, and if that's the case, when it does meet water, it can become hot. So that's the idea of the chumrah of gebrachs. It's discussed in the Shari Tshuva. In other achreinim, it's not a made-up chumrah of 10 years ago. This is a very old chumrah. And some people kept it, some didn't. It never really made it to the Sephardi world, to Artzot Mizrach, to the Sephardi countries, so they never adapted this chumrah. But amongst Ashkenazim, many did, and as naturally as occurs amongst different Hidurim, Hasidim naturally took this upon themselves more than Litvaks, even though there is actually no real distinction between Litvish versus Hasidic Jewry regarding the stringency. It's not a Hasidic innovation, and it's not a Litvish innovation. It's an innovation of a necessitation that happened with the new development of how they would create the matzahs. So many Litvishers also took it upon themselves, but mainly Hasidim were the ones, as a general policy of being mahaber and strict in mitzvahs, especially when it comes to chametz, though they were very strict with this mitzvah, this hiddur, this chumrah of suspecting for unneeded flour, and therefore not having a contact water.
Is it cross Hasidic group?
No, Breslev is not makbid on gebrachs as far as I know. If I'm wrong on that, please correct me, but as far as I know, Breslev is not makbid on that. And there are possibly there's many Hasidic groups. I am not an expert in all of them. They all have their own unique customs. But as far as I know, it's generally Hasidim are very particular in gebrachs.
What about the Indian of Alachilas Press? If you eat matzah throughout the whole meal, lav dafka, you're going to eat it Alachilas Press.
Okay, one second. I'm building up to the idea of eating during the meal. Okay, so based on that chumrah, what I would not do is I wouldn't make kneidlach, matzah balls. I would not go ahead and dip my matzah in water. I wouldn't eat it with anything that possibly contains water, basically. Okay, fruit juice already we've discussed in the past. Fruit juice does not create a problem of gebrachs, and the Alter Rebbe writes explicitly in his tshuva discussing this chumrah that regarding mei perus ein lahachmir klal, one should not be stringent at all, even though many people are stringent today because they just their conscience cannot handle chas v'shalom dipping the matzah into anything at all. But we'll get to fruit juice in a minute. I'll talk about fruit juice, and I want to first focus on this idea of eating during meal. So some people have adapted the stringency of, in order to ensure no mixture of the matzah with liquids, with water, and it can become gebrachs, then they don't eat it during the meal. So they first eat the matzah, then they clear the table, no matzah, and then they serve the rest of the food and eat the food. So I want to debunk this for two reasons. One, this was never the Chabad custom. Two, it's a halachic problem to do so. Let's first start with the Chabad custom. So the Rebbe Rashab, this was told to me by Rav Eli Lando, the brother of Lando from Bnei Brak, who recently passed away. I asked him this question, and he reiterated, he emphasized that no, this was not the custom in Chabad. The custom in Chabad was to eat matzah during the meal while eating other foods. And this was the custom of the Rebbe Rashab, and this was the custom of the Rebbe. The Rebbe did this by the Seder. The Rebbe ate matzah during the course of Shulchan Aruch, and while eating the soup. He says the Rebbe Rashab was machmirin, was that every time he took a spoon of food or of soup into his mouth, he would wipe it down each time, because maybe there's some leftover matzah crumbs in his mouth, and it's going to get on the spoon and get back into the bowl or the plate. So he would.
What would he wipe down?
The spoon. He would take a napkin or a tissue and wipe down the spoon. But this explicitly, Rav Lando told me that this was explicitly not a directive to the public. So in other words, the public, the Chassidim, would go ahead and not even wipe down the spoon. But to not eat matzah at the same time as the other food, that was never a Chabad custom. And even though many are accustomed today, that is a new innovation of the last, 10, 20, or 30 years.
We're not talking about
people extending the chumrah based on, there's logic behind it. They don't want to have possibilities of infiltration. So in order to protect matzah infiltration, they just ban matzah, right? They just ban it. It's gone. So, first of all, number one, there's no precedent amongst Chabad minhag to do so. Now we're to the halachic problem. It's halachically problematic to do so, and therefore a person cannot do so, and I'll explain why. When a person says hamaitzi on bread, we all know that according to the laws of Birchas Hanenin, it doesn't only cover the actual bread, but it covers all the food menus of that meal, all the food that's going to be served in that meal, if the food is considered eaten together with bread. Either it's eaten together with bread or it's part of a meal staple. But if it's neither, let's say like a piece of cake or fruit, then like a dessert, you would have to say a bracha independently of ha'etz or mazenis during the meal. That's a known halacha. Now, the Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch that when can bread count to the rest of the meal foods? Only if you're continuously still eating bread. But if you decide bread is now banned, from this course and onwards, bread is out, then the future foods that will be served are no longer tafel to the blessing of Amaitzi, and you enter yourself into a possible need to re-say a blessing. It's a suffix, we don't do so, but you're entering yourself into a suffix bracha. So it's possible, according to one approach that the Alter Rebbe brings, that you're eating foods without a blessing. So how can we do a chumrah that sabotages the laws of brachas that has no source? So therefore, my suggestion is as follows. Those who want to just do like it always was done, of course they can do so. You eat matzah during your meal, and you're just careful that it doesn't get into food. Now those who have people who may not follow these halachas, and as soon as they see gebrachs happening, they start getting headaches, nausea, and all these different psychological effects. So very simple. Have a matzah box open near the table, and everyone should be told to periodically take a piece of matzah and eat it. There is no matzah ban. Okay, everyone can eat. Just don't bring it to the table, but everyone can continue eating matzah. It doesn't matter. The point is that they're still eating matzah.
So it could be like 8 feet away.
It doesn't matter where it is. All it matters is that it will eventually enter the person's mouth.
Okay, so everybody can see.
Do they do it at the end?
It's not very clear if you make you're making a temporary ban. Also, I'll mention every Shabbos, if you, let's say, like clearing the table for the meat course and you get rid of your bread, it's not good. Aside from the fact that you're always supposed to have bread on the table for Birchas Hamazon, or for the bracha Birchas Hamazon to be chal on the bread, this enters the problem. Once you ban the bread, the cholent is no longer tuffle to the hamaitzi. It's no longer included in the hamaitzi, and therefore, a person has to be very careful to always not ban the bread. Bread is the staple of the meal. It should always be around. Take a little piece here and there. It doesn't have to be a huge piece. Take a little piece here and there. And the same thing with matzah. There's no room for matzah banning.
Okay. So there too, the bread could be like 4 feet away as long as everybody would keep eating it.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. The location doesn't matter. But as we know, what we see, we eat. What we don't see is not in our mind. We don't eat. So the best thing is for it to be around. Next.
So if a person just decides to eat enough matzah to bench afterwards, and then just stops and eats the rest of the meal, there's still that china?
100%. It's any banning. Let's say someone has celiac or any other medical or allergy issue with eating matzah. So let's say they do have the medical permission to go ahead and eat a kazayis or a kabetz. So they're very basic. But they're not eating any more the rest of the meal. Or someone on a diet. Let's say someone's on a diet on Shabbos, and they want to eat just the basic kazayis kabetza. It's a kabetza of bread, but they're banning bread from the rest of the meal because of their diet. In such a situation, they are entering into the suffix, and therefore the best thing for them to do is take a lollipop. I know it doesn't go well with the diet, but they should take any sugar or any shahakal dessert, say it, and have in mind, include in that shahakal, all the future foods of the meal. So then you're covered. That's your insurance policy. So if you're going to have to take the lollipop, you might as well just continue eating bread if you're on a diet.
Would a drink the same thing?
You can't say a bracha on a drink during the meal.
Lollipop.
You're still in the same problem.
I think you're an open box of matzah near the table where everybody's instructed to keep eating his best. It's very inevitably the kiddush that got spilled and the dipping in the egg.
So very good. So that brings us up to the next 2 points. That brings it up to the next 2 points. One from the Rabbi Rashab and one from his son from the Rabbi Rayatz. Are you allowed to eat matzah with fruit juice? We've discussed it many times. And I just mentioned part of it already before, and the Rebbe Shab did have a practice in this as well. The answer is yes. The custom of not eating gebrachs in Chabad was never extended to fruit juice. The Rebbe Rashab used to dip his matzah into wine and into milk. But I must emphasize that this was referring to wine and milk that was 100% as stated. Wine, squeezed grapes, and milk comes out of the udder of the cow. However, today, in our beautiful food marketing, we have a lot of infiltrations of what's called water, because water is cheaper than milk and water is cheaper than wine. And if the consumers don't know the difference, they're fools, so why not infiltrate water? So if you're buying a bottle of wine, most likely is that it also contains water inside. I'll give you 2 stories. One was with a winemaker who was a good friend of mine, and he was selling for Pesach bottles, special kosher for Pesach wine, and it said on it, 100% wine. And I asked him, tell me, is there really no water? No, this is water. It says 100% wine on the label. It says in the wine industry in Israel, when it says 100% wine, we can add at least 30% water. We had 30% water. You want me to take a loss? You want to pay a lot more money? So when they say 100% wine, they're still adding water to it. And Yaakov Yosef, when he was a member of the Knesset, he actually tried to pass a law to forbid this consumer fraud of adding water to wine. And he was not able to pass it because of the coalition of the winemakers. There was a threat from the coalition of the winemakers.
The wine lobby.
The wine lobby.
Well, the only thing is the hard wine they used to have half dead.
That's 100%. But we all know today the wine isn't hard. It doesn't ferment as long. It isn't as much. Yes, I agree with you. If you make it in the same way as back then, you would have to add water in order to make it drinkable. But the wines of today already are very mahadr with the water. According to Kabbalah, you're supposed to add some water to wine. So they're very mahadr. They're all Kabbalists today. All the winemakers today are Kabbalists. And very machmer Kabbalists. They add a lot of water. So, but nonetheless, when I spoke to the Hashgacha, based in Crown Heights, they told me that their Israeli-made, I didn't ask them about others, it could be it's also everywhere else, but that their Israeli-made wines are 100% wine, no water involved. That's what they said.
Oh, okay. Circle K.
That's what that's what Circle K said.
It's a good thing to buy that.
Okay, yeah.
And that was then.
Well, this was 2 years ago when I asked them. I don't think anything has changed. But basically, you can always contact the company. You can say, I have an allergy to water. Do you add water?
Yeah.
So technically, you can dip it's 100%
Yeah, so minadin, if it's 100% fruit juice, there's no problem to dip. Some chassidim are machmir and other chassidic groups, they accept it even fruit juice, but as we already quoted from the Alter Rebbe's Tshuva, ein lahachmir bezeh, the Alter Rebbe writes that with mei peris, ein lahachmir klal, there's no need or reason, and maybe even one shouldn't be machmir, the Rebbe Rashab was not machmir, but nonetheless some are machmir. Many were traditionally stringent either because, well, maybe there's no guarantee there wasn't water added, or, they just don't want to mess with it. So whatever, we're not putting down anyone who is machmir not to do so. It's okay.
If you make fruit juice,
Squeeze,
you take fruit and
squeeze
make
oranges.
juice.
Squeeze oranges, yeah.
Juice it yourself.
When you heat it, there's condensation. The condensation ends up putting water back into the juice or into the sauce.
Yeah, so that type of condensation that's coming as a result of that liquid would not considered actual water. That's like mei peris condensation. There's b'chlal a question if condensation is judged as water or mei peris. It's not so simple. But in this case, for certain, we would not view it as mei peris, as wine, even back then, quite often was cooked. It was pasteurized.
Yeah.
So, and nonetheless, we see the Rebbeim drank it. So I haven't seen that it has to be raw. I haven't seen such a suspicion, especially being, as I said before, sweat comes from the source. It's not just made up. So the sweat is coming from is coming from what's inside, and therefore what's inside right now is, In any event, if you took it to a scientific lab, I'm pretty sure that they'll somehow be able to find water everywhere. The question is this halachically considered water or not?
What about an avocado?
So again, another reason why some people are very machmir is because not because they don't believe in this idea that we can eat it with mei peris, but just because to facilitate it is difficult. Because it is. It's a little bit of a headache. You have to be very careful. Let's say you wash your knife. Let's say you have the policy. We follow the Rebbe Rashab. This is a Rebbe Rashab home. We dip things in mei peris. So the kid goes along, washes the knife, cuts the avocado, and puts the avocado in the matzah. What did that knife have a second ago? Water. And now that water's on avocado, now it's on the matzah. So now we have super gebrachs. It's not just plain gebrachs. It's called super gebrachs. It can become chametz in seconds. If it's just water, you at least have 18 minutes. You can dip and the 18-minute clock starts. But once you have fruit juice involved in the water, there's no 18-minute clock. The stopwatch says 001. It already becomes chametz. Meaning based on the chashash. So therefore, there is this fine line where you have to be careful. And that's why maybe a lot of people just don't want to they don't want the headache. They don't want to get into this.
Because what's going to happen now in my house? If I tell them, so you do an avocado with your hands. You don't have any water on your hands.
Right. So ideally, it's not
okay.
a problem. Yeah. So
in my household, they're going to celebrate all the things that Rabbi Goldstein said. Machmir.
Even I put it in the fridge. What's the problem?
When you take the avocado out of the fridge, you cut it up. It now has water all over it.
No, if it's dry, my avocado, that water is not considered water.
If it's cold,
that's not considered water. The water inside of a food is not water.
It's not coming from the fruit. It's coming from the air.
Doesn't matter. Once it's already been penetrating the fruit, I'll give you a little secret. There's no such thing as fruits that grow without water. All fruits have water.
No question. That's not the question.
So is that water? No. Once it's already part of the natural process of becoming part of the food, we don't view it as water from talach. It's not water.
But it's not natural parts of the fruit.
Of course it is.
You took it out of the refrigerator, and because you took it out of the refrigerator, like anything else you take out of the refrigerator, it condenses on the outside. That's water.
The condensation on the outside that hasn't penetrated, I dry off.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you. I dry off. But anything that's penetrated, if there's moisture that has entered inside, that has also created some moisture inside. I don't care about that. That is part of the fruit. The condensation of the outside, anything that's external and hasn't united with the fruit, I agree 100%. It's not part of the natural process. It hasn't entered the you dry it off. You dry it off.
I'm going to give my whole
Wait till the avocado's room temperature, then use it.
give my family a whole new lease on life. They're going to celebrate Rabbi Goldstein. Everything that we were mocking about for the past year and a half, they're going to say, that, my gosh,
you can still be mocking.
My hero. Actually, you're telling us that we can dip on a clean, non-watery avocado. They can dip matzah on any day of the month.
As long as, there's no water involved. It's not just avocado. It can be a tomato. It can be a cucumber. As long as water has been, guarded from, there is no water, then it is mutter to do so. Even according to our custom.
An egg? How about an egg? An egg too, then would be okay. You could have egg on. You could have an egg sandwich.
So with egg, there are people who do with eggs also in Chabad, but that's a very minority, and
no water in eggs.
I understand there's no water in eggs, but I don't know. There you're ready. You're cooking. It's open. I don't know. There are people who do so. I know people who do so. It's like Yerushalmi minhag that they eat eggs with matzah, even in Chabad, fried eggs. But
you can't use oil though. Is oil water?
No, oil is not water. Again, because I'm saying you do this in practice, you'll see that, especially with kids. They always take whenever you give them a finger, they take an arm. You give them an arm, they take the whole body. You give them the whole body, they take the city. So that's why a lot of people have put an additional guard railing on this matter. But the main thing is, of course, b'diavad is, of course, chas v'shalom, not to ruin simchas yantiv, not to make shalom bias issues if someone decides to be stringent. And as a general rule, it's not so simple that everyone in the family must follow the chumrah, or the father should make it a point that everyone must follow his level of piety. Maybe there should be a little bit of liberty, a little, very, very, very times of libertarians. So there's more leeway to allow other people to make the freedom, to be able to make their, especially Pesach, the holiday of freedom. But nonetheless, so everyone can make their own decision on what they want their policies to be, but these are the halachas and what has to be done. Okay. Yeah, thank you. The second point was with the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was, this is just a story to learn a lesson, which goes back to the point I said before, that on the Frierdiker Rebbe's table, during the Seder of one of the years, I believe it was Tafshin Beis, so the Rabbi Rayatz's grandson was Shalom Ber Gurari. He learned at that time in Torah V'das Yeshiva. And he brought over a few of his friends for the Seder night. And they were eating at the Seder table, the Rebbe Rayatz, with many, distinguished Rabbanim and other Chassidim. And one of his friends went ahead and took them, when the borscht soup was served, and there was no ban on matzah, as I've been continuously saying, there was no such thing in Chabad to ban matzah, so the matzahs were still around, so this bacher took a piece of matzah and dipped it in his borscht soup. Now, borscht soup is, of course, fruit juice, right, the beets, but is also water. So it's the worst ingredient for making gebrachts, for making chametz if there's a suspicion of flour. So he went ahead and he's eating and dipping, and the Chassidim are looking at him, and their faces are pale and white, and a big commotion, roars up at the end of the table, to stop him, grab him before he dips, A huge commotion roars up, and, Rabbi Yatz had a long table. This is the Pesach, the night of the Seder, and he asks, what's going on? What's all the commotion at the end of the table? And they said, someone was caught in a criminal act of dipping the matzah in the borscht soup. So Rabbi Rayatz said that it's better that the matzah become red than a Jew's face become red. That was the saying.
A Jew's face?
Better the matzah become red from the borscht soup than another Jew's face become red. That was his response to this.
Borscht soup is okay, no water in it.
Stronger than that.
That's what I've heard. I actually have not verified the story. It's a circulated story, and I take no responsibility for its details.
What?
It did.
It had water?
Of course, that's how you cook it. You cook beets in water. That's how borscht soup is made.
Oh,
So you obviously are not from Russia.
so he was lenient on this.
The Rebbe Rayatzno, the Bacher, Litvish Bacher, whoever he was, from Tereh Vadas, the friend of Barry Gurar, he was lenient on this, yes. Okay.
Why did they turn to that?
Sugar.
Yes.
Oh, no, not you. One more point that I'll mention on this. I don't know if I said this story. I don't think I've said this story before. This is a little more related to Matzah Shira when we're talking about worry of water infiltration. So by Chassidim, we only worry about, by Ashkenazim, we only worry about it when it comes to Gebrachs. If we're eating the gebrachs, the matzah with fruit juice, maybe water is infiltrated and then it can become hummus right away, which is why some people just don't eat it with anything. But Sephardim have to worry about this for a lot more serious of a case, which is matzah shira. We discussed in the past that Ashkenazim do not eat matzah shira, egg matzah, or any 5-grain product that has been cooked with fruit juices. Now, to explain that, min hadin, the whole basis of that you can dip your matzah in fruit juice is that fruit juice can't make something chametz, so the same thing would apply. Forget about matzah, take it a step further. I'll actually make cookies that are mezainis to eat on Pesach using kosher for Pesach flour and fruit juice. Right? You can do it. So the Ashkenazim are machmir. Why? Because we suspect for infiltration of water. That's one of the reasons. We suspect infiltration of water, as if water infiltrates the chametz momentarily, and it's even more problematic than just doing with water itself, and therefore it's banned from an Ashkenazi table. So any product that says in it matzah shira, it can have on it the signatures of 50,000 rabbanim. For Ashkenazim, it will remain forbidden forever. It's not mutter on Pesach, and not everyone pays attention to this. And a lot of stores, supermarkets, they sell it in the front, matzah mezainis cookies, matzah shira, kosher for Pesach, Avadi Yosef, and in the back they may be right for Sfardim, matzah shira. But that is no good. It's forbidden for Ashkenazim. I remember in the army, they once bought a whole bunch of this matzah shira cookies that they were so excited to serve mezainis cookies. And when I saw it in the kitchen, I collected all of it, and I said, I'm putting it in my office till after Pesach. I said, what are you doing? We spend so much money on this. I'm like, I'm sorry, we have Ashkenazim here in the army base. It's not just Sephardim, and they are not allowed to eat this. It was banned.
Did you say that you maybe try to carefully allow the Sephardim to do it?
No. In the army, we don't play games. It's either all or none. No games. So this is this. So basically, even many Sephardi Rabbanim have come out against these matzah shira cookies for a very simple reason, that they say that it's not following the directives that you need to keep it as matzah shira kosher for Sephardim, which is no water infiltration. If there is even a little bit of water infiltration, it's no good. Now, let's just be honest. In order to make sure that the industry, the machinery, does not get water infiltration, it has to be cleaned daily with non-water. Meaning you have to use wine or grape juice or orange juice, very expensive, to clean the machinery. To clean it, you can't use water to clean it, because you can't dry it once it's cleaned with water. It's impossible. It's impossible. Anyone who tells you that they've cleaned these long machines, I've seen it. I've done it. It's impossible to clean. They always contain some fat. There's various areas of the coil. It's just, maybe if you put through like Drano through the whole thing and it eats half the pipe up, then yeah, you cleaned everything and half the pipe with it. But otherwise, it's very difficult to clean thoroughly. And so because of this, they have to use fruit juice. So are they really doing so? Is this for sure guaranteed? So basically, this one company that's the main company. In fact, I think it's the only company that produces mezainis matzah shira cookies for Sephardim, with a hashgacha, of course. So many Sephardi Rabbanim, Mordechai Eliyahu, Yaakov Yosef, and others have come out against it and say it's not kosher for Pesach. It's not even kosher for any time during the year. It's chametz and it's yayin nesach. So they said two things. Number one, they did a surprise visit there, and they couldn't find the mashgiach. And there's all these, Thailandi workers, all these Gaisha workers there dealing with wine. They use wine, and the wine is yayin nesach. So the mashgiach finally came and says, "Where is I was in the bathroom." I said, "Okay, well." In the bathroom, when you were gone, that is a chashash and yain nezek on all the wine. So therefore, they said it's not even kosher for the whole year. But then came the real test, which is regarding the water, is it chametz. So we went through various testing, and today in hashgacha companies, what they do is that they send it to laboratories to actually check. They break down the food, they check every single part of it to see what is in it. But they didn't find so they went through various testing and they didn't find water, and they sent one of the head mifakchim, one of the head supervisors for the Rabbanut Rishit Yisrael at that time was Rav Dov Lando. They sent him to the winery that would produce them the wine. So this was Carmel Mizrahi. Carmel Mizrahi in Rehovot, in Rishon LeZion, they were the providers of the wine for these Mazanis cookies. So they went there and they spoke to Rav Yanovsky, who's the Rav of the winery, and they basically guaranteed there's absolutely no water anywhere in the process. So he wanted him to show him the process. So Dov Lando is going with Rav Yanovsky. They're going through the plant, and he asked them, well, how do you what containers do you use to send the wine with? They said the containers over there. In fact, we're doing right now a shipment. We're preparing it to send to them. So he picks up one of the containers and he casually goes like this, and he spills a whole bunch of water on Rav Yanovsky's face. And Rav Yanovsky's, there's a whole entourage of people says, "What are you doing? What are you embarrassing me? What are you doing?" He says, "But I thought there was no water. You told me there was no water." So what happened? They would wash the containers, and no one thought about drying it, and they would put the wine inside. So we see they were caught red-handed.
Red-handed.
One of the partners wanted to go public with it.
What's that?
3 partners, the 2 brothers, involved with the company.
Which? Carmel Mizrahi or Papa Shada? The Mazanis, yeah.
Cookie company.
Right.
And he went public. He was going to go public, and his brother said to son him, he said, "I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with your products, and I want nothing to do with." He totally. Well,
they spoke for a number of years that it's absolute chametz and it's very dangerous and nobody should eat it. Not dangerous, halachically dangerous, and nobody should eat it. And actually, before he passed away, Yaakov met with his father, who was always giving the backing for the hechsher, and he told him what he's saying. What are you doing? How can you give a hechsher to such a place? And he said, "I didn't know. I had no idea. He never went to look." And when people would ask him, "How can you say it's not kosher when your father gives the hechsher?" He said, "My dad was never there. I was. I saw what went on there. We did the research. He didn't do the research. He was asked, according to halacha, if you mix only wine with, according to Svarim, so he said, of course it's okay. So I'll pee. Ravad Yosef, it's mutter. Yeah, I'll pee. If you follow the rules, it's mutter. But yeah, we all agree that cow that shechted properly is kosher if it's shechted properly and you did the bedikas. But if it's not cow, if it's pig, then it's not kosher. So, anyways, we'll just conclude with one more thing, and that is, I said before, regarding sugar. So the Rebbe Rashab had a chumrah in which he would not eat any sugar at all on Pesach. And I'll just mention, a lot of the Chabad chumras of Pesach come from the Rebbe Rashab. They are based from the Rebbe Rashab. Some go to the Alter Rebbe, some go to the Tzemach Tzedek, but for the main part, they are from the Rebbe Rashab. And he suspected that there was sugar, that there may be crumbs of chametz in the sugar, and therefore would not eat any sugar on Pesach at all. Now, it was stated regarding this that this was not a directive for the public. This was not a directive. In other words, the Rebbe Rashab wasn't happy, and this was always amongst Chabad Chassidus. It wasn't looked good upon when people would become copycats. When people would look at the Rebbe and copycat what the Rebbe is doing.